Rolling open.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Jason Hawley. The first death by Ebola occurred in Dallas, Texas today. The presence of the disease in the United States has prompted extensive media coverage, despite the fact that Americans are more likely to die from influenza than Ebola. Is the U.S. prepared for a potential outbreak? And should this be our focus as we head into the flu season? Also, Facebook employee bus drivers in Silicon Valley are making efforts to become a union as they are working 15-hour days with little pay, and this has pushed employees to call for this union. Also, we will discuss a recent report published by a technology news site that stated Tony Hsieh has stepped down as leader of the Downtown Project and what this may mean for downtown Las Vegas. Before we open the floor for discussion, let me take some time to introduce our panelists. We have to my right Jason Thompson, a graduate student in journalism and media studies. Welcome back. We also have Kaya Ogudo, a junior majoring in broadcast journalism. We also have with us returning James Schaefer, a sophomore pursuing journalism and media studies. Finally, we also have Sarah Montes de Oca, a graduate student in journalism and media studies. Thank you all for joining us today. Let me start off with Thomas Eric Duncan, Liberian man who was the first case of Ebola to be diagnosed in the United States, was pronounced dead this morning. The U.S. will begin to do more screening on people who have recently visited countries in West Africa. Do you believe this is enough? Is the U.S. taking significant necessary measures in avoiding an outbreak that could be widespread? Or are these measures a little too late? Are we prepared for a potential outbreak?
Well, I guess I'll start. I'm not sure if we really are prepared. As far as the measures they've taken, I think so far so good, but there are outbreaks occurring apparently now also. I don't know if you're familiar or have heard of, in Spain, a Spanish woman, there was an Ebola breakout and she had not traveled to West Africa, so who was she in contact with? So now I think we need to be prepared more to take the measures as a global society to really take care of, is this globally widespread? And I mean, as far as what we're doing, the screening, I think it is a little too late. It could have started as soon as the first person with that case came to the U.S.
So we should clarify the woman in Spain that contracted Ebola. Now, you know this better than us. She contracted Ebola without contacting.
They're not sure.
Being in contact with anybody else, but the existing reports argue that you can only contract Ebola if you exchange bodily fluids with the person who is exhibiting symptoms.
Right. So there must be someone in Spain that was exhibiting symptoms that, who knows, they may still be exhibiting and contracting the disease to other people.
So might we be experiencing an end of the world scenario? James, what do you think?
Now, I might be wrong with this, but I believe it was 2 missionaries in Spain that ended up contracting Ebola. And with that being said, in how or what can we do, I think the first thing that we need to stop is not Ebola, but the panic that is generated from it. I mean, when we panic, more people die from us worryingly getting into doctor's office next to unhealthy people as ourselves are healthy. We need to make sure that we're telling our audience, the American people or the world, that we can handle this. And that when it comes to the information that you need to trust, it needs to come from the CDC. We don't need to discredit the CDC and say, I think they're lying to us. I think the government's lying to us. We need to trust our government. If anything, this is a time for us to trust each other.
But can we handle it? Are we prepared? I mean, he came to the U.S. and now he's, this was fatal.
And I'm glad you brought that up because the medicine that we're using to combat this, Chimerix, I believe, is the company that is creating it, is a experimental drug.
Right.
And with the worker aid that came from Africa and was cured.
There were 2.
But wasn't there the one that There
was one from Spain that I think died, and then the 2 that came, that one was a doctor and I believe his assistant.
Right.
They 2, both of them were saved with the experimental drug. So.
Right.
It just depends on a case-by-case scenario.
Right. So when it comes to combating it, there is the preliminary combating, and then there is the in-case combating. When it comes to in-case, I think we're well acquired. We know what to do to combat the disease. But when it comes to preliminary, I think more can be done. You're right. But is it too late? I say no time is too late than the present. Currently, I think the president said that he is now enacting extra screening at 5 different airports in the United States. Those measures are measures we need. And if anything, I think that we should make sure that those measures are increased at a very stable rate. If all of a sudden every single airport in the United States was given additional screening, there would be more panic than there would be cause to combat.
And what about connecting flights? I mean, how are we dealing with that? Are we dealing with that?
That comes to councils, I would say, like I don't know if the Security Council would be a good one to mention, but look to the UN.
That's an interesting point, but you're saying Jason, what do you think about this? Should we be looking to the UN even? I mean, should we trust in the government?
We have to look to ourselves and to everything right now, because I think if you look from 76, the deaths are going up like this, and each time it's a roll of the dice. It could mutate and get airborne. If it gets airborne, we're all done for. Especially the third world.
But,
we got to eliminate poverty.
We have to mention, Jason, that, I mean, it's a fairly stable virus. That's
right
what
now,
we
but
have
each
been told.
mutation is different.
We've been told the mutations.
Of Liberia, or not the president of Liberia, somebody from Liberia in their big newspaper wrote a thing that said that they think the government of the United States, through its long history of biomedical warfare, might have either escaped or intentionally was inflicted. And this is, so we have a lot of reports coming out, and we need to get to the bottom of a lot of these different, issues.
I could see it as fertile ground for conspiracy theories. What do you think?
Well, I know that when he first came to Texas, that Liberian guy, he wasn't diagnosed when he started having the symptoms. They didn't test him for Ebola when he went to the hospital the first time, and I think after maybe a few days or 2 days later he went, and that was when they tested him for Ebola. But he was already just his family, of course, they're on quarantine now, and I think probably the people in Texas that he's been encountering and maybe possibly been giving this Ebola symptom to are going to be infected. So it's not just, okay, he died, but we're worried about the people in Austin, Texas who may have contracted the Ebola disease from when he was, when he was the 2 days that he wasn't diagnosed with
When
it.
he got off the plane, he didn't have symptoms. Yeah. Later, he had the symptoms, went to the hospital, they turned him away. 2 days later, he came in an ambulance and had been in isolation ever since. So the fact that they turned him away makes you question, how are they running these tests? Why didn't they test him for Ebola? I mean, if he had the symptoms, why did they turn him away with just antibiotics?
Those facts being said, I think that we can agree that the picture that we are painting of this patient is as a victim. I think it was being said before that they were wanting to file a lawsuit against him for bringing that into the country.
Right.
The issue I think we need to see is when we look to this man that has passed, we can't label him as a criminal for spreading this disease. No. He is a victim. And I think out of that we're able to better understand how to treat victims. If someone were to bring the Ebola to the United States, immediately they're labeled as a host, a spreader, someone that we hate, someone that we should push away. Although from a health perspective, yes, if someone was coughing and they have Ebola, you probably want to take a couple steps back, but we should not look to them as a criminal, but more as a victim. And that's what every single Ebola patient is, a victim.
All right. Well, on that note, we will move on to our next topic. Now, we're discussing here Facebook's employee bus drivers. They are seeking to unionize. Employees are now speaking out. They spend almost 15 hours shuttling highly paid Facebook employees to and from work in Silicon Valley with very little pay. These 40 drivers are seeking support from the union for higher wages and are suggesting a split shift schedule since they live too far from home before having to return to shuttle Facebook employees home as well. So what are your views on union participation? Is collective bargaining good or bad? And to be specific, a number of media outlets have reported that drivers are working from about 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Now, if they were a part of a union, of course, this would change. Is unionizing still relevant in the contemporary landscape? Jason, what do you think?
I'm kind of like the old squad bred in defensive anarchism by Robert Wolfe, and I almost think that there is a mechanism. They can always quit. It sounds bad, but you look at GM, 1890 to 1930 was going great. Well, it didn't start in 1890, but just economy, American economy, the way America used to be, and then all of a sudden GM now they went bankrupt because of their unions. They're paying these huge salaries out, and it's just kind of dragging the country down, I think.
All right.
But do you think Facebook would ever go bankrupt? They're just like, as far as like social media wise, it's like I feel like more Facebook users than ever now. Like they're global. There's so many people who are using Facebook. So I feel like as far as bankrupt, I feel like it'll be a while, if that they'll ever go bankrupt.
And
So.
Go ahead.
But on that case, it's more of a supply meets demand. You're saying, do they have the money to meet the demand? And I think on that, of course they have the
Yeah,
money. They're
yeah.
Facebook, and it's not they're just Facebook. They also own many other companies. That being said, when it comes to the demand, we asked, is that demand justified? Like you said, they have split shift hours. They go in from 4:15 to 9:15 and have to be expected to get back at 12:15.
Correct.
And that's horrible. And should the union fix that? I think yes. But I think a portrait that we should eliminate of those Facebook bus drivers is that they are ailing workers that have these horrendous hours and they are needing something to help them. According to the New York Times, these are workers that have generous medical, dental insurance plans and a provided vacation, sick leave, and holiday pay. I could say that's more than most people get around this table. Would you agree?
But I think they need an area. If so, then I think they need maybe a designated area somewhere on the Facebook campus for them to be able to hang out and take a nap. And
Sure.
Because it is too much time to waste really when they're off the clock,
Yeah.
wasting time or napping on the bus, or they need somewhere comfortable to be. And Facebook, I know, refused to comment much on
Yes.
this. So that makes me question a little bit too. They have these highly paid employees. They can afford to give them better wages and, okay, paid vacation, but
To Facebook,
That's
this is
not
something that's
everything.
going to pass. I mean, in order for them to understand that this is an issue, it's going to take maybe something like a union
I
to
agree.
get their
I think
attention.
a union needs
but
to be-
that being said, I don't think that there is no other options left on the table. When it comes to with these bus drivers, what should be done, like we said, they have the money. They have the money, they have the power, and they have the authority to hire more drivers and get more buses. If it comes to that time shift problem, then what is the issue with hiring more bus drivers or buses? But, like you said, if Facebook isn't listening, then maybe the correct answer is a union.
Now, let me ask you this question. Some have argued that when you bring in unions and when you try to use collective bargaining in order to ensure you have kind of a stable landscape for these types of workers. Now, it is controversial. Some have argued that among contemporary companies, Fortune 500 companies, the assets of that company are no longer the employees like these bus drivers or the workers. The assets are the profit margins. They are the capital. It's the capital itself that the company accumulates. Is that the case now? Is that the broader kind of philosophical paradigm in which these companies operate? What do you think?
Unions do have a stigma, and if anything, this is the Teamsters union they're
Correct.
applying for help to. Yes, unions do have a stigma, and yes, when they do unionize, there is they do become, I don't know the word you want to use, but not as loyal to the company as they were before the union being established. I do agree with you on that, but I think when it comes to the need for a union, it's more of getting the attention of Facebook to take care of this problem and not, like you said, not make any comment. So when it comes to the prospect of a union, I think it's more to garner the attention of Facebook, not...
Yeah, I think it's taking maybe higher measures to get their point across and say, okay, we're asking for more money or we're asking for more support from Facebook employees.
But that's not to detract, but unions do have a very awful stigma.
I do, and on that note, we will, of course, at this point take a short break, but please stay with us. We will be back in just a moment.
change the skin they were born with and say they'd die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org.
Help support the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act, a bill that will help make sure women facing a mastectomy are told all their options about breast reconstruction. Visit brawdayusa.org for more information.
I remember the moment
I'll never forget that moment.
that changed my life.
At that moment, it hit me. This is why I joined the Guard. We're soldiers, always ready to protect our country. But we've also got communities. Family, friends, neighbors who count on us. I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life to somebody from my hometown.
See what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
I realized at that moment, these people really needed us. And I was going to make a difference, right here in my community.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. With regard to the Facebook issue, bus drivers attempting to unionize with Teamsters in Silicon Valley, there's a broader question that comes to mind, and that is the philosophy of corporations at large. Perhaps one could argue that in the 90s and in the 80s, and if you want to work around that time frame, employees were at one time viewed as assets to a company. But when we look at the conflict that is surrounding the unionizing efforts of these bus drivers, it does raise the question of whether or not employees of contemporary companies are really viewed as assets or expenses to the bottom line. Are employees of these companies viewed as assets or not?
I don't think they're viewed as assets whatsoever. I think people are easily replaceable, especially now. I mean, you can hire younger employees for cheaper wages. The unemployment rate as it is, so people are lining up for jobs. So to be honest, I think it definitely has changed from assets. The whole multi-skilling, the fact that you need to have multiple skills in order to fulfill one position is now huge. And it's true, unfortunately, or fortunately, it has changed with the advancement of certain technologies. And I think it's important to consider that you're easily replaceable. So,
does anyone have any other thoughts on this? What are your thoughts? Is this the case?
Yeah, I totally agree because, like she said, unemployment rates are really skyrocketing. More people are applying for unemployment and
But the
food
unemployment
stamps.
rate is at 5.9%. It's the lowest it's been in 6 years.
but that's a whole nother realm. How do we define unemployment? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, like as a means
So the
of,
rate, so it's not, 5.9% isn't real.
it's just as a means of like making money. So like people still have their like side jobs and side hustles, but I just feel like what she said, like as far as being an asset, it's not really needed because companies are so much high in demand and they're profiting so much that it's like they can like have employees, like especially bus drivers, for example, who anyone can drive, and people who need a bus driving job or any type of job will be eager to take that offer. So that's how I feel about it.
Interesting. Jason?
I think if they get too expensive, then they'll go to Google and get the automated drivers. So they have to be careful. I think they should be lucky that they have a job. In this country, we all don't get a job. We have to make our own jobs. And it's kind of harsh, but I think if we all have that mindset, it'll be better for everybody.
Okay. James, would you agree with that?
I'd be careful to agree with that. I mean, like you said, let's look back to the 80s, 90s. I take it all the way back to the 60s. If you look at someone that really agrees or disagrees with unions, I looked at Jimmy Hoffa. But that being said, I think, yes, people that are a part of unions do become assets, pawns in the game. When it comes to how a union garners attention, it's everyone not coming to work. It's getting the attention of the company saying, hey, we need a pay raise, otherwise we're not coming to work.
And is that a bad thing?
It's a bad thing
Is
in
it a
different
bad-
situations. In this situation of Facebook, yes, they need to get the attention of Facebook. And yes, I would say that maybe the way to get that attention is maybe pulling out. Telling Facebook, hey, listen, if you think that we're that special, give into the demands we're asking for. And compared to how much Facebook makes and how notorious they are, I think they'd be able to meet that demand.
All right. Well, on that note, we will move on to our final topic. In late September, Tony Hsieh stepped down from his leadership position in the Downtown Project in Las Vegas here. Subsequently, 30 people were laid off, and thereafter, rumors quickly spread of more to follow. The question here that is raised is, Tony Hsieh was the leader of the so-called Downtown Project that was very much sponsored by Zappos and Tony Hsieh himself personally. Tony Hsieh set aside upwards of $250 million of his own money that was invested by the Downtown Project throughout downtown Las Vegas. Given that he has stepped down, and prior to this, by the way, the word or the phrase return on community was removed from the website, and then he goes ahead and steps down. Is he attempting to slowly, socially pull out of this environment and then eventually perhaps fiscally pull out and take the profits that he has made?
I don't think he can do it on his own. I think these small businesses, I think he provided the foundation, and I think he definitely led this project. However, I don't think it should be solely relied based on him to keep providing these funds for this move and glamour of downtown Las Vegas. I think there's a push to it. I think he did what he had to. And I mean, he wasn't going to be around forever. Or did they rely on him to stick it out and keep investing? I mean, I think that's a little too much. So I think it should be based on small businesses and the locals moving forward with this.
That makes sense. To play devil's advocate, and I want to say before I say this, I totally agree with you. To play devil's advocate, downtown is very naive. It is a growing, nurtured organism right now that is trying to garner the attention of the rest of the community around it to say, hey, we're a safe part of town. Come shop, eat, buy here. But I do think Tony Hsieh leaving has harmed the community in a sense. It has harmed not just the reputation of the Downtown Project, but maybe that's so of Zappos. I mean, it's not going to be the attention of Zappos buyers outside of the state, but it will be the attention of the Zappos employees inside the state. I do think that when it comes to Tony Hsieh leaving, and yes, he did remove the community and replaced it with connectiveness. He is being very fragile with it, but I do think him leaving has harmed not just the integrity of Zappos, but the community as well.
I think the harm comes from us, like looking to Tony Hsieh to solve all of our problems when we have to look inside. And I lost faith in Tony Hsieh after I offered him some of my wife's miracle butter, all natural 360, and he took it and he ate some of it. I mean, you're supposed to put it on your skin. So after that moment, I was just like, what? No offense to Tony Hsieh, I hope you invest heavily in the company.
So let me ask you this then. All right, let me ask you this. When somebody who may be familiar with Tony Hsieh, roughly familiar with Tony Hsieh, and familiar with Zappos, may have heard of Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness, may be familiar with the narrative of Zappos, which is inclusiveness, service, being a strange figure but an inclusive figure, one who is involved with their peers, right? I've heard, and perhaps you've also heard as well, that Tony Hsieh garners this idea of almost a religious leader because, you know, there are drum circles held at Zappos. The Downtown Project was arguably something of a similar atmosphere. So is this kind of like losing a religious leader in a sense?
The reason why that atmosphere, I think, retains its drum-circledness is because when they first moved down to downtown, they brought all of the restaurants that they loved down to downtown. It's not just the followers are part of, and the grocery store.
No, they need a grocery store.
Oh, they need a grocery store. Oh,
down
okay.
there.
It's not just the employees that feel they are part of a religious cult, but they also get followers by saying, we like you, we love your product, come with us.
Can't they do it on their own? Do they really need Tony Hsieh though? I mean, I understand that he funded it and he, again, laid out the foundation, but he's not going to do everything for them.
I do think that some of those shop owners have felt a little bit of disloyalty when Not from the consumer basis, because obviously the Zappos employees are still going to shop there, but from a leading perspective. Yes, they may have lost their religious leader, but they've also lost maybe the guidance. They don't know who's going to be leading that downtown center anymore. And the one person that was able to guide it with a steady hand is now leaving.
Well, that's a problem. They need to learn how to lead.
But like I said, it's a section that is being nurtured. And you can't stop watering a plant whilst it is still growing.
But do you think someone would take his place as far as the position
I think
goes?
the community needs to take his
Everybody
place.
needs to
I mean,
step up.
everybody needs to step up and be aware and you know, keep the profits growing and find ways to do so. Just because, again, a leader, Tony Hsieh, you know, this god that people see him as, I mean, just because he's backed down, I mean, he still, I think, is partially involved, right? I mean,
He is.
owns a couple, I mean, built the
He's doing a good
containers
job.
park
He's doing
and
great.
whatnot.
He's
So
about great things to the downtown.
he's slowly backed away, yes, but again, I don't think we should rely on just him.
But we shouldn't accept anyone that doesn't have experience in order to guide that center. A lot of effort has gone in to make that center what it is today. And if we put someone on it that's inexperienced, someone that we don't know, someone we don't trust, we could pay a very, very good cost for that.
Well, it needs to be well thought of. If, again, maybe not just one person, but a group of people that are well prepared or well educated, even on how to lead and become leaders.
Yeah, and we can't forget that it was Naked City, and it pretty much, if you walk down there, it still is Naked City.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind as it progresses, and keep tabs on it for hopeful future discussion. But that is all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas or topics you'd like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV-TV. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.